What's up, friends, and welcome into Fantasy Pros, the football podcast. It's rank times for week 6. Joining me today, of course, is Pat Fitzmaurice, the legend at Fantasy Pros, and we've got Billy Muzio back in the house, my 49er brethren, with Roger Craig and I think Montana flowing in the background. Is that correct, Billy? Is that Montana?
That's Montana.
Okay, we can only see the arm, but it's how many of that jersey era of 49ers is it going to be? It's going to be, and you know what? Dummy me. Steve Young, it would have been a left-hander, so I should have had that the whole time. Very
and we know it's not Jimmy Garoppolo in Billy's mural.
Yeah.
We know that.
Or the great Jeff Garcia back in the great 49er day, though I did like Jeff Garcia for all it's worth. Welcome in, everybody. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. We've got running backs on the docket for you today. We're going to be going through all the week 6 RBs, where we've got them ranked, where some of the things are going to be changing. So this should be a very good one. Before we jump into all the action, we got a little bit of housekeeping. And by housekeeping, I mean giving you free stuff. Would you like free things? Well, then here you go. This is your chance to win a signed Justin Jefferson helmet free, courtesy of our friends over at pristineauction.com. All you've got to do is head over to fantasypros.com/contest, complete the form. Then you can either download the Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard app, leave a review for the podcast, follow us on X, Instagram, or TikTok, all at Fantasy Pros. But guess what? You can do all those things because the more actions you complete, the more entries you will receive. We'll be announcing a winner right here on the podcast, actually just like we did last week. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and so you can claim your prize. Gentlemen, we are going to battle these ranks out. I'm going to pick at both of you and see, why are you so high? And Pat, why do you hate this player? And why does Billy Muzio love that one? But let's give a shout out to the week 5 rank accuracy experts out there. Marco Enriquez was number 1. I believe Marco's Fantasy Pros here too. Number 1 in the world in the week 5 ranks. Congratulations, Marco. And I believe he had a top 10 earlier this year. So I think Marco might be killing it right now. Dalton Del Don, little living legend as well. Number 2. And Kyle, Soppy. I'm bad with names. We're going to go with Sop, but Kyle Sopp, number 3 on the list. That's your top 3. And Pat, I thought about not doing this, but we have to give credit because Joe Pisapia finished inside the top 20. He was the highest of our crew. You never want to give Joe the credit because his head will not fit in the box in here on Fantasy Pro, so he might be out for the week. And Pat, check this out. He was the number 1 wide receiver ranker as well in week 5.
Joe, number 1 at a position, top 20 overall, the 7th sign of the apocalypse. Wow.
That feels about right.
You know the saying, a broken clock is right twice a day. So
yeah, well, I didn't know that clock could be the most accurate of them, even when it's broken. But Joe did it. Congratulations, Joey. Number 19 in the overall accuracy. So that is pretty impressive. Wasn't me. So we got a hat tip to Joe. All right, gentlemen, let's dig into this. It's Welsh, it's Pat, it's Billy Muzio, and it's RB ranks for week 6. Let's go look at the big board over on Fantasy Pros because you guys can check out all of the ranks positionally across the board, IDP and more from the top rankers in all the land, fantasypros.com/rankings. And then you can go and look and see where it's at as they adjust throughout the week. So let's go jump over to the running backs on our top 12 board. Looks like Derrick Henry is the number 1 as far as ECR goes. Saquon Barkley, Jordan Mason, Alvin Kamara, and Bijan Robinson fill out the top 5. Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Jacobs, Breece Hall, James Conner, Ken Walker, David Montgomery, and James Cook. That's your top 12. We kind of know the crew. Not a whole lot of debate, except for one interesting development. We'll do this kind of quickly since these are the top guys. Alvin Kamara is in at number 4. He's going up against Tampa Bay, ECR. You guys have a big split, but the most interesting part about this is, Billy, you have him at number 1. He's your number 1 RB this week. Pat, you've got him at 7. So, Billy, let's start with you. What's got you putting Kamara at number 1? Are you banking on quintessential 4-touchdown Alvin Kamara day? We already got one of those. So are we going to get another?
No, I don't necessarily think it's the 4-touchdown week, but I do think that we have a switch at quarterback due to the Carr injury. We don't exactly know who's going to be at quarterback, but what we do know is that anytime we see a quarterback come in that is either inexperienced or maybe less than stellar, they typically lean on the running back, on not only on the ground, but inside the passing game. So someone we're going to see some extra work inside of the receiving game in the flats. Maybe some screen games, maybe something, across the middle. So I think Alvin Kamara is going to be that outlet here for the quarterback. So this is somebody who's already seen, quite a bit of utilization of the passing game, upwards of 20%. And I would not be surprised to see that at 22%, 23%, maybe slightly higher. And somebody who's already been dominating the groundwork. So week 5, we saw him with 90% of the snaps, 85% of the rushing share, 25% of the targets in week 5. I think that we could see something similar to that, if not possibly higher. And so this just breaks down to a volume play for me from an inexperienced quarterback that's going to be leaning on his running back.
So I'm with the logic of this, Pat. I'm with that, you're going to have a younger quarterback. You're going to lean on not just the running game, but you're going to lean on safety nets. And I mean, Alvin Kamara is like the epitome of RB safety nets, where you're going to throw screen passes, get the ball in his hand, let him do stuff. Maybe we see a tiny bit of an uptick in Taysom Hill running the ball a little bit. He's not really a safety net tight end, but it's hard to gauge kind of where it's going to go. Pat, are you pessimistic on Alvin Kamara, or just not as, I don't want to say Billy Muzio the enlightenment of it, but like what's got you at 7? Because that's like a little bit further down than consensus. So again, is that just how the chips fell, or do you feel a little pessimism with the change on the offense?
I do feel pessimism, and I think Billy is probably right about the volume. And we did see when Jake Haener came into that game late after Derek Carr got hurt, we saw him trying to get the ball to Alvin Kamara a lot, but the defensive front for the Chiefs was also kind of like tightening up. And I'm worried about that Kamara is going to see a lot of 8-man fronts. The Bucs are already tough against the run with it's a Todd Bowles defense. So like Vita Vea up front, just not a great matchup. The offensive outlook is greatly reduced, whether it's Jake Haener or Spencer Rattler. And I would feel a little bit better about things if it's Rattler and not Haener. But man, like we saw that 5-touchdown bonanza for Alvin Kamara in the first 2 weeks of the season when the Saints blew out the Panthers and the Cowboys. Only 1 touchdown in the 3 games since. And I don't think his touchdown prospects look real good this week.
I've got one other quick one on this. There was a ton of concern going into this week, or in the panic, the trade market. I do the buy, sell, hold, and we're talking about trades, and you can feel the panic that's out there between Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall. Yet both are still in the consensus ranks at top 8. Is there one, and Pat, maybe we'll start with you, is there one of the two you're more concerned with as far as the production? Breece is coming off of like 2 really, really bad performances, and we've got 2 straight weeks of Bijan not taking like a seat back, but like he's giving up some of that share to Tyler Algier. If you are more concerned about one of these two this week, which one?
A little more about Breece, just because it hasn't looked real good with him so far. And like this is a favorable matchup. It seems like a get-right matchup against the Bills, who do not play the run very well. But they just have not been giving him a lot of volume, which is weird because the Jets were out of it last year, late last season. And they were giving Breece Hall these enormous workloads, which seemed maybe not like the logical thing to do. And we just assumed that was going to carry over into 2024. And it really hasn't, because they've been giving Braylon Allen a lot of work too. So I'm more worried about Breece Hall, but that worry is all relative. I've still got him RB6 this week.
Yeah, and I know it's kind of a relative thing, like in general with these guys. One of the things I'd also point out to, new head coach coming in, or interim head coach coming in, good time to kind of get back to what you've been missing. And I think the most glaring piece has been Breece Hall. I mean, Garrett Wilson, that was fixed this past week with all those targets. The new piece would be get Breece Hall, of Jeff Ulbrich coming in here, probably going to want to run the ball quite a bit. So that could be for Breece. So Billy, maybe just change it. Is there any concern with either one of those two moving forward? Because there's a lot of fantasy owners worried and freaked out, kind of want to trade. Do you have more worry for one of those two than the other?
I agree with Pat. I think the concern is more for Breece Hall, especially given this week and moving forward. There is the hope that with the head coach change that we do see a little bit more Breece Hall, but it's not like Braylon Allen is like, 50% snap share or rush share. He's in that 30% range. He's just taking advantage of every single opportunity he's getting. And I mean, how could you not want to play a guy who's been playing as well as he has been, especially in today's NFL, where, you don't want to just use a workhorse running back and wear him down. So from a fantasy perspective, yeah, it absolutely is horrendous, especially given the ADP that we had at Breece Hall. But from an NFL perspective, it makes a lot of sense. So I think Braylon Allen is here to stay. Breece Hall's probably, looking like a bad ADP pick now, but he's definitely the most talented back on the field. So you're going to hope that they do get the ball in his hands a little bit more.
All right, let's go jump over to the RB2s. Those are RBs 13 through 24. Reminder, these ranks will kind of adjust. So I may be giving you a number. Know that that's probably going to end up being a range. As more rankers submit their ranks, you'll start to see adjustments. So just a little FYI for everybody. But coming in at 13, you've got Chuba Hubbard, DeAndre Swift at 14, Tony Pollard at 15, followed by Brian Robinson, Chase Brown, J.K. Dobbins, Najee Harris, Ramondre Stevenson rounding out the top 20, Travis Etienne at 21, Rico Dowdle, Bucky Irving, and Jerome Ford. Some interesting names on that list, but also some interesting spreads between you guys on your ranks. And let's start with Tony Pollard, who ends up having an ECR of 15. Pat, you've got him a little bit lower at 17. Billy, you're the high guy. You've got him inside your top 12, the high guy, as an RB1. So, Billy, why don't you hit it? Tony Pollard breaking your top 12 this week. What do we got?
Yeah, Pollard's just been dominating the snaps. Again, whenever I'm looking at running back ranks, I'm looking at volume because volume is king in fantasy football and especially at the running back position. Throughout the season, Tony Pollard has seen 64% of the snaps versus Tajay Spears at 38%. Rushing share, he's seen 58% versus Tajay Spears, 26%. And even he's dominating the routes, which is where we thought Tajay Spears was going to be more involved. And it's 50% of the routes for Tony Pollard versus 35% for Tajay Spears. And so this just breaks down to a volume play. I love Tony Pollard. It looks like he's fully recovered from that tightrope surgery that has been hindering a lot of athletes as of late. Last year wasn't as explosive. Looks like that explosiveness is back. And I think Tony Pollard should be inside the top 12.
Pat, there's a really interesting thing that also when you look at this kind of screams, if it wasn't kind of a disaster already, this screams, look at 0 RB wins the game, because look at all these dudes that are in here. It's like Chase Brown. Tony Pollard was one of those really late ones. Rico Dowdle is in here. Jerome Ford. They're all inside in the RB2s, bye weeks as well. But kind of, pulling that in here, one of the things that stands out is Pollard was really good early on, but seeing DeAndre Swift as high and being right next in the ECR, they're next to each other. You are lower on Pollard. You've got them down at 17. I obviously want to get your take on Pollard, but I'm curious, where's the gap for you between Swift and Pollard this week? Are you Swift over Pollard? Because it sounds like Billy is Pollard over Swift.
I do think I have Swift ranked 1 or 2 spots higher. That is close to a coin flip, though. And I'm not sure I entirely trust either running game. It's not that I don't trust the Titans running game. Maybe it's more that I don't trust the Titans offense, whether it's Will Levis or Mason Rudolph at quarterbacks. I just don't know what the scoring ceiling is and what the touchdown ceiling is for Tony Pollard. Solid, as Billy pointed out, he's been getting pretty reliable rushing volume and some usage in the passing game too. Although, he had a season high 22 carries when we last saw him back in week 4 against the Dolphins. But then again, Tajay Spears had 15 carries that game too. That was just grind away against an overmatched Dolphins team that was missing its quarterback. So, the Indianapolis run defense, kind of a confusing matchup because they have gotten destroyed by Joe Mixon and Josh Jacobs and Tank Bigsby last week, but they also put the clamps on DeAndre Swift and Najee Harris in weeks 3 and 4. One reason maybe I'm a little below consensus on Pollard, the Titans offense is operating at the 4th slowest pace in the league, which could cost Pollard some valuable snaps. But then again, going up against a turbocharged Indianapolis offense that's ranked 3rd in pace. So maybe it's kind of a wash there.
Maybe. We'll see. If Anthony Richardson plays, we'll see what that does with the offense as well. Here's an inverse. So where Tony Pollard is 11 for Billy O. There's your new nickname, Billy. Billy O. And Fitz is 17. we're going to bring back in another one of those running backs that feels weird to belong here in Chase Brown. And Chase Brown, ECR is 17 this week. Billy has him at 17. And Fitz, you got him at 10. So this is your version of Tony Pollard jumps in. This is a massive rank for Chase Brown with Zach Moss still there. So let's hear it. You break it down. What has and what is making Chase Brown a top 10 back for you this week?
Yeah, so, I mean, I won't speak for Billy. I'll let him explain. Maybe Billy is ranking as if Zach Moss is going to play. I'm kind of making the assumption Zach Moss does not play this week with what seemed like, at least as far as the injury doctors I turned to, they seem to think Zach Moss had a high ankle sprain last week, in which case he would almost certainly not play this week. So this could be the first time that we get to see Chase Brown operate as like a lead back and workhorse with maybe just occasional relief from Travion Williams. And he's going to be the lead back in a Bengals offense that's just been on fire. Over the last 3 games, the Bengals have scored 33, 34, and 38 points. They've averaged 417 yards of offense per game over that stretch. And Brown has looked terrific this season, 5.6 yards per carry. The Giants, not necessarily a great matchup. I mean, any defense that can stick Dexter Lawrence in the middle of the defensive line is not going to be a pushover against the run. But this should be at least a run-friendly game script for the Bengals as road favorites against the Giants. So, yeah, I mean, I think you absolutely start Chase Brown if Zach Moss is out.
So, Billy, is this, I'll use the word again, is this like a pessimism to Chase Brown in general? Is this not playing in that Zach Moss is out? What do you think on Chase Brown?
No, this is a wait and see what the news is on Zach Moss. There's been kind of some, I don't say misleading reports, but kind of talk out of both sides of the mouth that, you know, he's going to miss the week. He avoided serious injury. He's okay. So this is just, hey, let's wait and see what the injury reports say today, coming out later and Thursday, and then we'll make a decision from there. But I agree with Pat. If Moss is out, then yeah, he's inside the top 10. I mean, this is a team that has not traditionally ran the ball. You know, this season they're 27th in team run plays per game, but he's averaging 6.2 true yards per carry, which is number 3 in the league. He's got a 36.1% juke rate, which is number 4 in the league. You know, he's explosive. I like to call him Jamal Charles Light. I mean, this is a guy that can take it to the house on any play, and love the talent, love the opportunity if he's given it as a starting role. And I would love to see, I'd love to see a player out for injury, but I'm a big Chase Brown believer and fan, so I'd love to see him take the opportunity to run with it.
If Moss is out, would Chase Brown jump Tony Pollard for you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so there you go for everybody. Just playing the waiting game here for Chase Brown. This is probably the biggest numerical RB difference between you two for this player. And we're jumping in, coming off the bye, J.K. Dobbins, who has a ECR of 18 on the list. Fitz, you've got him right around that range at 19. Billy, hello, at 6. So I would ask, is Chase Brown going to be higher? But probably not. J.K. Dobbins, you're all in on. So let's break it down how he cracked that top 7. Is he higher than Breece Hall for you?
He is higher than Breece Hall for me.
Baby, let's go.
This is one of those plant my flag weeks, I guess, with J.K. Dobbins. And I've been wrong, kind of not necessarily all season on him, but I've just kind of been watching his sample, I should say, his workload increase week after week after week from week 1 through, week 4. And he's kind of moved up in the snap range from the 50s to the 60s to the 70s, in the rushing attempts from the 40s to the 70s, and now in the routes as well, kind of floating in that 50% range. And so this is a back that we're seeing, kind of take over the backfield from a snap share perspective. We're seeing Gus Edwards slowly but surely fade out, no longer in that friendly RPO system, and now he's exposed. And J.K. Dobbins is taking every opportunity and just doing wonders with it. I mean, he's just been absolutely phenomenal. This is the back that we all thought we were getting years before when he was getting injured. So happy to see him do it in this friendly run system. So I think that based upon the volume and the matchup, it's not the greatest, but with that type of volume and with his ability to break one loose, I like his chances.
I've had this roller coaster all offseason, Pat, with J.K. Dobbins, because I was massively in on Dobbins preseason. Him and Dowdle were my 2 highest share late running backs, and then funny enough, Dowdle disappointment, and then all of a sudden it's coming back. But then Dobbins was really successful in week 1. But then I felt like we got to get out of this. This is way too successful. Let's see if people are willing to pay these high prices, because it was all kind of off of explosive plays and wasn't really breaking tackles. Well, sure enough, they just kind of keep going and going. And Gus Edwards, that's the thing I didn't think would happen. They started right before that bye to phase out Gus Edwards. Now, maybe they'll come back to it. But in a case where Dobbins is the main guy, because I think one of the arguments was, as fun as Dobbins is and as good as he is, this offense is a little bit of a question, and they're splitting carries. And Gus Edwards is going to also maybe take the touchdown equity. None of that is really in play, and maybe that will change off the bye. We don't know. So I kind of give you all that little narrative, Pat, to say, are some of those things for you what maybe is holding back? I mean, you're not low on him. You're one spot lower than ECR at this point, but to not kind of jump feet first into the J.K. Dobbins pool, is there a little bit of pessimism with the offense and Gus Edwards still around?
Not so much about Gus Edwards at all, but 3 reservations here, Welsh. And I do mostly agree with Billy's assessment that Dobbins looks like a real safe volume play, but we haven't seen him get to 20 carries yet. And I do wonder if maybe the Chargers sort of cap him a little bit, just knowing what his extensive injury history is, and maybe not wanting to redline it with J.K. Dobbins too much as far as usage. So that's one thing. I don't know if he's got a 20 carry ceiling. The matchup isn't great. Like, this Broncos defense under Vance Joseph has just been terrific. They are 6th in DVOA against the run and have allowed the 10th fewest fantasy points to running backs. But mainly it's just that this is not going to be a high-flying offensive showcase between the Chargers and the Broncos. The Vegas total on this game is 35.5. So I wonder what the touchdown equity is for J.K. Dobbins here. Does he get into
going
the
to
end
Dobbins,
zone?
Pat?
That's an Iowa. That's an Iowa-like spread, by the way.
That is an Iowa Hawkeyes type total. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of it. The Chargers have scored 10 points in each of their last 2 games. I don't know what the what the touchdown potential is for Dobbins here. Not sure what kind of odds you're getting on in any time over at DraftKings.
Well, guess what? We are going to talk about these next round of running backs, but we are first going to talk about DraftKings, because the roller coaster of an NFL season, it's moving right along, and it promises to be a month full of tricks, treats, and of course, touchdowns, baby. And DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Running it in from the 1 or putting up an 80-yard bomb. We don't care how they score touchdowns. We want to bet them. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app right now and make your pick. J.K. Dobbins, we actually don't know. The line is not out there yet, but I'm going to guess it's probably going to be like 1.5. But you know what we do know? Billy Muzio's #1 running back for the week, Alvin Kamara, it's plus money at DK for an anytime touchdown. If you want to get crazy, get 7-1 for 2 touchdowns, because, when Alvin Kamara brings them in, he brings them in bunches. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns, by downloading the DraftKings Sportsbook app and using code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, fellas, let's take a look at the RB3/flexes 25 through 36. We've got Rachaad White coming in at 25, Tyrone Tracy at 26. That's a little placeholder on the Singletary side. Tank Bigsby breaking the top 30 this week. Trey Sermon, Javonte Williams, Braylon Allen, Alexander Madison, Roshan Johnson, Tajay Spears, Tyler Algier, Cam Akers, and Justice Hill rounding it out here at the end. Let's talk about Tank. Tank ended up being a big focus on our shows last week, and then he ends up being the #1 fantasy option this past week. It's a little tricky, Pat, because we had Bigsby has a lot of good underlying stuff. We're seeing, his usage go up a little bit. He had this massive day and actually a low amount of carries, like 13 carries for over 102. But we also got these words that Etienne was banged up. He had a shoulder injury and they didn't want to risk anything, and that he's still the guy. So there's a lot of support in that way. You have got him at 27. So you've got him at consensus. Billy's got him a tiny bit lower. My question is can Tank and Etienne thrive together, as some backs can? Unfortunately, we don't see many backs do it. Here's the common thing that happens. it's really not about the new guy that comes in that makes himself really valuable. It's about what they take away from the top guy. So Rachaad, Bucky Irving comes up. He's a flex. Rachaad White moves down to kind of a flex. Braylon Allen comes in. Breece Hall goes from elite to we're looking at like RB2 territory. Can both of these guys thrive? And what do you think Tank does to Etienne if Etienne is still their guy?
I don't know if they can both thrive in an offense that isn't that great on a team that isn't that great. So I'm a little worried. Like I think if anything, I might be too high on Bigsby. I'm worried that I have him overranked rather than underranked. And he does have a little bit of momentum in this backfield. Saw him get a season high 13 carries and a 40% snap share last week. That's encouraging. And he did look terrific. 101 rushing yards and a 28-yard pass reception. The problem is that was only Bigsby's second pass reception in 22 NFL games. It's not like he can't catch passes. He had 30 catches in his last college season at Auburn. It's just that's kind of Travis Etienne's role. And Etienne isn't going anywhere. Maybe they do give Bigsby a little more work with Etienne's shoulder banged up, but Etienne's not going away. And the other thing is, like, the Bears haven't been a difficult match. A good run defense last year. This year, 30th in DVOA against the run. So they've not been a difficult matchup. But what happens if Bigsby gets game scripted out of this one with the Jaguars underdogs on the road at Chicago? That's what your worst nightmare is if you are a Travis Bigsby investor and you're starting him this week, that the Jags fall behind by 2 or 3 scores. Because if they do, he doesn't have the pass catching production to fall back on.
It's a great point. You do need the Jags to stay in the game because this is starting to look, I've been saying this a lot, so apologies for anyone that's heard it, but Billy, this one reminds me of kind of the Buck situation, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, where it's like Tank is kind of becoming their Bucky Irving, and then Etienne is still the Rachaad White. I think Etienne had like 6 catches in here, but it could be a lot about nothing. Etienne could just jump back in and get massive roles. So, I mean, when you have Tank a little bit lower in there, I know 30 kind of says like, yeah, this is a fine flex option, but like, are you like feel good? Do you trust putting Tank Bigsby in at a flex this week?
Trust is a strong word, and I wouldn't fully trust it. But this is just one of those kind of wait and see as well. I mean, do they limit Etienne in practice this week? Is he gonna sit? Is he gonna play through it? I mean, this is also a placeholder. But I think if Etienne does sit for whatever reason, it's a shoulder injury, so he could probably play through it. But if they're cautious, I don't know what the coach's mindset's going to be. So it's a lot is dependent upon this. But if Etienne's playing, I mean, Bigsby probably moves down in my ranks, quite frankly, because even last week with the increased workload, he still only saw 40% of the snaps. He did see the majority of the rushing share at 57%, but this is not a guy they're targeting 3% of the targets. On the season, the target share is under 1%. The rushing share is under 33%. Snaps is under 20%. So it's not somebody I want to say I'm comfortable starting unless Travis Etienne is out.
And Etienne, by the way, was at 21 on this list. So that's one of the further down ranks he's had as Bucky Irving is coming up. And I think what you're going to see, the best advice we can give everybody is that I think everybody's in a holding pattern because Bucky Irving was incredible, was great, but there is a slight little asterisk that's on the back of it that, he hurt his shoulder and they didn't play him in the second half as much. So this game will tell us a lot. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if you put him as a flex, but it's not a slam dunk, even though he's inside the top 30. Javonte Williams. Here's a player that you guys really are not against each other because you guys are both higher than consensus. And, this was also Erickson on the buy sell show early in the week that he has him as buy. I'm not as much. So I'm going to sit back and hear what you guys have to say about this because I just don't trust the Broncos offense. And I know Javonte has looked a little bit better. I don't know if there is a real true startable Denver Bronco in fantasy right now. But Billy, you've got Javonte at 20. Pat, you've got him at 25, multiple spots higher than ECR. So, Billy, sell us on Javonte Williams getting in that starting lineup this week.
Yeah, this is a consolidation of kind of running back touches between injuries and uncertainty, and Javonte's kind of been just the lead guy by default here. And we've seen his role kind of off and on, but getting a little bit more consistent as of late. 2 weeks in a row, we've seen him now at 60% snaps. 2 weeks in a row, we've seen him now over 50% of the rushing share. 2 weeks in a row, we've seen him over 42% of the routes. And so this is a back they're starting to gain a little trust in. I still think that Jaleel McLaughlin has a role and he's going to be involved, but Javonte's starting to kind of dominate snaps and touches all around, especially when you get inside the 5. Javonte Williams seen 70% of the snaps inside the 5. To Pat's point earlier, kind of a low overall scoring game, most likely. This is a low total, but if they do get within the goal line, Javonte's going to be the guy, and I think they're going to continue to lean on him in short yardage. What we've seen is 80% of the snaps in short yardage. So Javonte, to me, just by volume and by default, going to be inside that top 20.
And I think volume was a big question. I would definitely put a big, if they get into the red zone. That Broncos offense is a question, and what version of Bo Nix shows up, because we've only seen that negative version of Bo Nix for the majority. I know, I think last week it was better, but Pat, same thing. What's your take on Javonte Williams? Are you buying back in? You've got him. You have him right outside of the RB2 range, but you're right there. What do you got on him?
I'm buying back in because I think he fell out of the good graces of both rankers and fantasy managers after that horrid 3-game start. But Javonte was going against 3 really good run defenses: the Seahawks, the Steelers, and the Buccaneers. So all 3 of whom are top 10 in DVOA against the run. So people were totally ready to pull the ripcord on Javonte after that. The last 2 weeks, though, 18 touches. He's on pace for 58 catches. We know that Sean Payton running backs are usually pretty productive as pass catchers. So I just think it's a good spot for Javonte, a volume play here. And maybe in some leagues, you're stacked at running back and don't have to force Javonte into the lineup. But I think in average size 12-team leagues, he's probably a starter for most fantasy managers, I would think.
Big question for a lot of people over the last couple of weeks. Let's do a price check, as we like to do here. Price check on the Buccaneers running back situation. ECR, we have got Rachaad White up at 25. Bucky Irving, where did Bucky end up moving to? We had Bucky Irving at 23, so Bucky Irving has moved up. Billy, you have got Bucky at 28, and you've got Rachaad White at 26. Fitz, you have got Bucky at 29 and Rachaad White at 28. So consensus rankers have moved Bucky above Rachaad White. You guys both have not done it, but it looks like you both are playing, not playing, I say lightly, as in we still don't know. They're eating into each other. We're still waiting for a separator here. Billy, is that how you end up taking this? I feel like these situations, when they're like this, you end up just saying, I don't want either one of them. I don't want to start anything here because it's impossible. Full PPR, Rachaad White has a little bit more of a boost, but just curious because you guys are both Rachaad over Bucky, which is avert from the consensus rankers.
Yeah, PPR, I think that Rachaad White gets the lean, but in half point PPR, it's a little bit closer. Rachaad's still dominating touch. When I say dominating, 70-40 on the snaps, but it's definitely getting closer. And we're seeing the trend with Bucky Irving starting to see more and more snaps, more and more rushing attempts, and he's starting to actually run a little bit more routes. I mean, it started the season, in the 20% in the route range. Bucky Irving, as of last week, was at 37%. And so we're starting to see Rachaad White counter production here, and where he's starting to decrease as we're seeing Bucky Irving increase. It's one of those, I don't really want to start either player unless I absolutely have to. It's going to be a flex spot. If I am, they're no longer in the starting spot. I do think Bucky's going to start to see more of the rushing share just because he just looks more of the part. I mean, this is a guy who's averaging 5.6 yards a carry, where Rachaad White is averaging 3.7. And through Rachaad White's career, he's pretty much averaged 3.7 for the last 3 years. And so Bucky Irving comes in year one immediately in getting 5 yards plus a carry. This is something they need on the ground, where Rachaad White is more of a reception specialist at running back and has a fluidity to his game, but not necessarily a guy who's going to be able to break through the tackles and get chunk yardage. So like Bucky Irving, breakaway run rate also, he's got explosive plays. He's number 7 in the league with breakaway runs, or his rate, I should say, and he's number 14 in runs because he only had a limited share at 3. So if he gets more opportunities, I like his chances, but we're just kind of wait and see mode.
And Pat, you've got Tank Bigsby over both of the Buccaneer running backs. Just want to point out. Do you want to add anything on those Bucs backs?
Yeah. So as Billy said, Rachaad's averaging 3.7 yards per carry. That was with the run of over 50 yards last week against the Falcons. So I do think Irving's the better runner, but like White is so good as a pass catcher, he's just not going to disappear. And he did have 11 more snaps than Bucky last week. One thing to watch, though, Bucky did lose a key fumble late in that game against the Falcons, and he also got rolled up awkwardly late in the fourth quarter of that game. So he might be dealing with some sort of ankle issue this week, just something to keep an eye on as we get closer to the weekend.
Lots and lots of RB questions. I know there's going to be lots of start and sit. Well, guess what? Don't want you guys to forget, we've got a weekly start and sit live stream on our YouTube channel where you can come in and you can ask specific start and sit questions. Bucky Irving, Tank Bigsby will be with you every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So for those listening on the podcast, just go to youtube.com/FantasyPros, subscribe, click the bell so you're notified when all of our weekly live streams are going on so you guys don't miss any of the action for your RB ranks for week 6.